Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'll tell you what, there's a plague. We talk about so many different plagues of entrepreneurship here on this show, but the one plague that we've never openly talked about, because I haven't actually been confronted with this by a guest, but today's the day where we're talking about the plague of always feeling like we need to launch new things, create new things. We always need to be building new things instead of optimizing, maximizing, and really investing in what we already have. And today's guest is the best of the best in bringing this to the forefront. Her name is Traci Robinson-Williams. She is an innovation and technology business strategist who founded and leads Claroti, Inc. Previously, she led the market insights function for GitLab. Prior to GitLab, she helped envision, develop, and evangelize emerging technology solutions and capabilities for Accenture Federal Services. In previous roles at Accenture, Verizon Wireless, and other companies, she also integrated go-to-market efforts, identified new areas of business opportunity, provided strategic counsel to executive leadership, and drove market-facing thought leadership activities. Now, here's the cool thing about Traci that I'm already itching to get into this with her. She is the mastermind behind the marketing-powered innovation concept and movement. Marketing-powered innovation is exactly what I teased at the top of today's episode, which is that philosophy where we can optimize, maximize, roll with, utilize the assets, the sales, the products, the services that we already have. We're going to learn a lot from Traci today, and it's probably going to save us a lot of work while also giving us the meaningful work to start getting results. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Traci Robinson-Williams. All right, Traci, I'm so excited that you're here. There's a lot to live up to today, but welcome to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate you inviting me here.
Heck yeah. I obviously told listeners a little bit about your bio, your experiences, and what it is that you do, but they always love hearing it from the guests themselves. What's your short story of how you got into all the amazing things that you're up to today?
Wow. One of the important things I think we ought to lead with is management guru Peter Drucker said there are two functions of a company. One is marketing and the other is innovation. And my specialty is actually the intersection of the two. I have worked for many companies over the last couple of decades, and one of the things that I repeatedly see happening and see the opportunity for is how can we take what they already have and create new ideas, new opportunities, new markets, and bring those to their customers. And by doing that, really create new revenue streams for them. So that is really the basis of something I found that I was really good at and wanted to be able to do this on a more niche basis.
Yeah, I love the way you phrase that because I know, having looked into your work, how intentional you are with words, how intentional you are with messaging. And it's right there. And when you describe what Claroti, your company, does, Claroti helps marketing organizations unlock untapped potential in their company's existing products and services to create new streams of revenue. Traci, where is that born out of? Because there's a lot in there. I feel like it's calling out, rightly so, many entrepreneurs, many businesses for not realizing the potential of all of these things that we've already built. Where's that philosophy come from you?
You know, I always talk about this analogy of just imagine your significant other calls you at 5:30 and says, guess what? I've invited people to dinner tonight. Can you figure something with what you've already got in the pantry? You know, your budget didn't really necessarily allow for you to call, a delivery service, but you maybe are able to contact your neighbor and say, I can borrow a cup of something. But the point is, this market, these people are coming at a particular time, and you need to be there to solve that problem. But a lot of times you don't have the resources to be able to wait for maybe your innovation function or R&D or whomever in your company is doing that. And you have to really figure out, how can I repurpose, recycle, reimagine those things that I already have, and then be able to take that to the market that's waiting for exactly what you're able to bring to it.
Yeah, I love the impromptu dinner party example. It's a really good analogy. I'm someone who's visual, so I love the fact that you use that with us. I want to ask you this, Traci, because I have been an entrepreneur for 15 years now in various capacities, various industries, various business models, products, services, everything in between. And it seems funny for me to think and be called out today because I've always been of the belief that, okay, if I have, these services, let's say my marketing agency, for example, that I started in 2012. So we did SEO and WordPress web design. And when we wanted to grow our revenue, we said, what else can we possibly offer? What other stuff can we offer? Instead of saying, how can we make more revenue from what we're already offering? So we were constantly building things, Traci, and it always felt like we were starting from zero. How the heck can we say? I think it's a beautiful dichotomy that you position for us here. Existing products and services to create new streams of revenue. How can we do that? Existing stuff creating new revenue.
Right. Well, if you actually look at some of these things and say, are there new use cases, new applications, maybe an adjacent market that we can look at that would want what we already have? And sometimes it does take something that's called recombinant innovation to actually realize these things. So that's kind of a part of this marketing powered innovation piece. So recombinant innovation is the concept of saying, I've got peanut butter, I've got chocolate. What if I put these things together, right? And then I could create the most popular candy in the world, right? What if I took a valise, right, a piece of luggage, and I put wheels on that? Now, when was the last time you went through the airport and you actually saw somebody carrying a suitcase? It doesn't happen very often right now, but whoever came up with that idea of putting these wheels on there created a new category, changed the market altogether. So this is really a paradigm shift of being able to say, here is another market that hasn't even realized that they can benefit from what I'm doing. How can I go ahead and connect with that market and bring them what they really need?
Yeah, Traci, I love the examples. You're hitting on all my favorite examples today. You and I talked about sweets before we even hit record here today, and now you're dropping Reese's examples on me. Makes me super happy. I want to ask you about that adjacent or complementary use cases, for example, or adjacent use cases. I love that paradigm shift that you're sharing with us because my argument always has been people like you, Traci, you have an unfair advantage because you work outside of one industry, you work across many industries, and you're able to steal, you're able to pollinate, you're able to take these ideas and inspiration from all different industries, which is why I feel like agency owners really do have that advantage over entrepreneurs who are in their day-to-day. What is that process of getting outside of the boxes that we all exist in to start even thinking about these? I mean, when you use the example, it sounds so simple now. I can't picture people at the airport carrying luggage, but you're right. It's just become common sense is that people have luggage on wheels, but they did borrow. I don't know. Maybe someone saw a skateboarder one day and was like, why don't we pull luggage on skateboards, for example? How do we get outside these boxes?
Well, one of the biggest things I think it's most important is to be a collector of input and to be able to read and widely be able to review things that maybe aren't in your sweet spot. So are you maybe reading across industries, looking at and delving into different things? Some of the biggest innovations in the world have come from people who are looking outside their industry at day-to-day functions and are able to take those and incorporate those pieces now into what they're doing. And I think that is one of the biggest pieces here is to not narrow your focus, but to expand your aperture and to be able to look at things that might just interest you. You might go to the beach and, look at the way the waves hit, and maybe there's something there in that pattern that now affects what you're doing. Or maybe, the way birds fly or anything like that. All of this is something that could maybe spark that creativity within your organization, within your department, to be able to look at that. I would say that, looking at, for example, the way your product may have been designed. So, for example, maybe it was a software, and that software was designed for one particular market. But what if that same software could be used now for an adjacent market with maybe a slight twist to it. It may not be a very big deal, maybe just to change permissions, for example, on who can access what. But then you have a different way of taking that to market. And so my suggestion at that point would be to say, how do we now reach that particular new audience? How do we teach them how to use it? How do we expand the footprint we already have with it?
Yeah, Traci, one thing that really stands out to me in the way that you answer these questions is you can't help but use the term go to market. And a lot of us, we always think about launching new things. We think about building new things. But I'd say what makes you particularly unique is you do think about that go to market strategy. You're not just thinking about having the idea. You're not just thinking about building whatever that idea is. You're thinking about actually bringing it to the marketplace. What does go to market mean to you? How is it that you frame it in your own mind? Because it's something that I feel like, because it's obviously a buzzword in the business world, we don't give it the due credit that it deserves of saying, hey, this is the obligations that we have within any successful go-to-market strategy.
Mm-hmm. Well, go-to-market is basically all the actions that start from beginning to delivery of that product to the market. So it could be, figuring out what your target market is, what that persona is, what those, how you're segmenting the market. It now becomes also the formulation of how you're going to craft the packaging around the messaging around that product. How are you going to position it? And then how are you going to craft the sales enablement piece of that? How are you going to work across the different silos in your organization of sales and customer success and support? And how are you going to actually, use marketing as a tool to get all of these things out and delivered, and be able to, measure that as well. So you have to go from that idea to measurement and iteration to go back and keep looking at, that and what can we do better to keep that delivery going. So it's a very long, extended sort of process. It's not just we're going to launch this product. It's not just that we're going to have sales sell it. It is the concerted effort of all of these groups working together across your organization to deliver this and to get customers to buy into whatever you're selling.
Yeah.
So, no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Traci. I'm into this right now.
Well, so that is, all of that is very, very important. And I lost my thought about it. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, I'll get it. Obviously happens because we're weaving in and out of so many different topics. But for me, the thing that you just called out there that I really think that we need to talk about more as entrepreneurs in general, as businesses in general, is you said going to market. It's not a quick thing. And that's almost what we always want. It's why go to market. Well, that's something we can do. And I think you and I have both used this word already to paint that contrast, is that launch. A launch is a moment in time. When a rocket launches, 3, 2, 1, there you go. The rocket has launched into the sky. Go to market is that cycle. Where do you see businesses going wrong in this cycle of the go to market strategy?
I think that the lack of collaboration and integration across the organizational components can be a significant part of how it may not succeed very well. And I think that everyone has to be on board and rowing in the same direction, and realizing that they have unique and very critical roles to making this happen. But also the other failure of this one is to not see that there are pieces before what everyone normally recognizes, and then there are pieces beyond that. And so it is that extended cycle, and it is part of that customer success piece. Because a lot of times I think people may say, okay, well, we've delivered this, we've sold this, we've delivered it, it's done. But it's not. It's that continued experience that the customer has. And customer experience is such a huge part of what we should be doing, what we're focusing on now, because our markets are demanding that. And we can't just operate in a way that we may have 10, 15, 20, 30, 50 years ago. All of these things need to change because people are having better experiences every day with your competitors, with, they say maybe their banking function, with their, online apps for different things that may be more, maybe more digitally native than your company is, especially if you're a more mature company. So, part of this is thinking about how do we see things from the customer's eyes and then deliver that way as opposed from internally. One of the things that I wanted to stress with you too, Brian, this is what I forgot, was that go-to-market is an intrinsic piece of the marketing-powered innovation piece. First of all, there's that creativity piece of finding what is it that we could be doing with what we have. But the other part is the execution on it. And you have to be able to deliver this, or else there's no value in the idea that you had in the first place. So, in order for marketing to have that value, and that's what this is all about, this whole movement that I'm stressing is all about helping the CMO and marketing leaders and their functions and departments within an organization to be able to bring that value that maybe they're not seen for. So do you mind me getting into this now?
No, I'd love for you to. I love this role that you're on.
Okay. So the thing is, the very interesting thing I'm seeing is we're at a really critical crossroads for CMOs right now. On one hand, the average tenure for a CMO is 28 months. 28 months. Now that's about, you and I both know that's about the time they're getting their stride, that they're really, figured out how everything is going to work and put it, that the plans that they've been putting in place all along are really starting to show fruition. But that's really the tenure for that. On the other hand, there was a 2022 study by Gartner that said that the C-suite is now looking for the CMO to bring this growth and innovation opportunity to them, right? So they were asked, okay, who owns the growth function? And everybody says, well, we raise our hand. We do. But then on the other hand, if everybody raises their hand, then nobody does, right? Nobody owns that. But what they're thinking is they're looking to the leadership of CMOs to bring this to their companies, right, to their enterprises. And the question is, how can they do that? And that's what I'm saying is this is supporting this critical juncture in time that we have with marketing powered innovation. The CMO and the organization that they have is now distinctly and uniquely able to take those insights that they have and, what they already know about the positioning and the brand that they have and figure out what's that DNA of our organization and then take it to market. And that is I think the beauty of this concept. It's a great time for all of this. There's an opportunity for some leadership and value creation from the CMO's organization. And this is the way they can do it, or one of the ways they can do it.
Yeah, Traci, I'll tell you what, I do feel like we are coming full circle from the statement that you made really early on. I think it was probably your first answer here in today's session, which is all of this stuff happens at the intersection of marketing and innovation. And the way that I'm hearing you talk about this, I said it to you before we hit record today, is I was like, I don't think most marketing people think like you. And I can see why. It's because marketing is truly only half of this equation. And with your innovator hat on, it makes sense. Listeners know we always ask our guests before we hit record, what's your zone of genius? What's your superpower? And you didn't hesitate. I loved your answer. It's giving people that room to think in hypotheticals, giving them space to think, to dream, to have ideas. And you immediately pointed to your favorite question. What if we did this? Talk to us about that hypothetical question and how that really is such a key component of that whole innovation cycle.
Well, I think that one of the things that I see as a strength that frankly probably annoys a lot of people I've worked with in the past is that I take that like 360 perspective. I have like the Rubik's Cube in my hand, and I'm that person that's going to say, well, what about the other aspects of this? What are the other faces of that cube that we're not seeing right now? And how can we either, leverage those things? How do we minimize them? How do we see things in a way that we've never seen it before? And some of the problem is that sometimes people want to do what they've always done. And I have this, it's a good thing, it's a bad thing, but I need new variety. Right? I'm always looking for the way to change things, to make things better, to look at things in different ways. That just stimulates me. And so, I kind of recommend this now for other organizations to say, spend some time just thinking about what would happen if you did this? What would happen if you do that? There's this thing that is called, that the Shell Corporation does. It's called scenarios. And in fact, governments around the world rely on them to do this. And they look at this concept of, what if these things happen? What are the opportunities? What are the downfalls? How could this affect the world? How could this affect, particular markets, in their case, the oil and gas industry, but other things like that. And so what I would suggest is have someone in your organization that is looking at these things and saying, what if this happens? How do we prepare for this? Where do we take this opportunity? So for example, I did a total addressable market study that said, looking for developers and how we were going to serve this particular market. And then realized that one particular country was going to have this enormous explosion of the developer market, that they were training these people. And so my suggestion was, what, we need to get ahead of this and get into, providing licenses, providing, training and messaging and branding. It's not a market we want to be in at this particular time, but how do we cultivate that and nurture it for a later point? And that's what I'm suggesting too here is sometimes opportunities aren't necessarily ready right now. How do you identify, but then build and nurture so that when you are ready, should you choose to go that direction, it's not too late. And you can leverage that when you're ready to do so. So part of this is not just a short-term strategic vision, but it's also that long-term, and that the long-term, like, chief strategy officer sort of concept, right? The CMOs can step into that sort of role and really bring value that takes maybe that target off their back and gives them, the opportunity to turn marketing from that cost center perspective and perception to a profit center. And that is a big thing because, in my younger years, marketing, this was said to me, oh, make it pretty, make it pretty. And, just kind of that sort of like dismissive aspect about what marketing does. Now, you and I both know that marketing's role is much more critical than that. But there are a lot of people that don't necessarily give it the respect that it's due. And, this is one additional way that not just the things that marketing is expected to do, but over and above that, how do we drive that value for the organization in a way that is measurable, tangible, executable, and recognizable so that everyone benefits?
Yeah, Traci, there's so much that I want to dive into from here. Gosh, I feel like you and I could talk about this stuff literally all day for days, which I'm excited because we're going to get the chance to do over coffee in Northern Virginia in the not too distant future. But before I let you go here today, Traci, I do want to dive into a couple more topics, one of which is that hearing the way that you just shared your perspectives on all of that with us is what I'm also hearing is not just, marketing meets innovation, but a key component of that innovation is understanding the more macro trends, the more macro direction that markets are going into. And I'm not going to lie to you, where I mentally slip as we're having this conversation today is I start thinking about all the ways that I can innovate within my own businesses. And then I start thinking, you kind of just put into perspective where I was like, we're not talking about innovation for innovation's sake. We're talking about innovation to be tapped into, to have our pulse on where things are going, not necessarily just where they've been and where they are, but essentially where they're going. How do you even identify those? Obviously, this is a big loaded question and there's a million ways to answer it, but I'm super curious with your analytical hat on, which I know you wear so well, what are those opportunities that you even look for when it's part of the innovation cycle that you say, hey, this is something that's worth us even exploring?
Well, it's kind of like this famous quote from Wayne Gretzky. He's like, I don't skate to where the puck is, I skate to where the puck is going, right? And I think all organizations need to prepare themselves for that type of thought process. One of the ways they can do that is maybe by partnering. You don't know necessarily, this is what when I was talking about the analogy about borrowing something from your neighbor. Those are your neighbors, right? Can I get a cup of sugar from that partner that does this? What if we take their peanut butter and mix it with our chocolate, and now we can go to market together and use the resources of both organizations to do that. And that way, there's their insight, there's our insight, there's their motion of sales and their database of customers plus ours. So there's one way of looking at it that way. Again, I would say look at adjacent markets that you sell now to the financial services, right? There are a lot of regulations that are in the financial and services and banking industries and fintech. Because you have those certifications for whatever you're doing, maybe it's easy for you to step over into serving public sector, right? So that's kind of an easy way of stepping into doing that. But I would recommend doing that kind of thing and just kind of sit there and just rethink, reimagine, reassess the things that you currently have and just say, well, what if I move this? What if I do that? And just ask yourself a lot of questions. That's part of it. And again, as I mentioned, reading across and informing yourself. So when I say that, Audible books count, podcast, YouTube, whatever. But informing yourself of different things that are going on in the markets and just, understanding that. One of the things that I even recommend is looking at like newspapers and articles. And sometimes your potential customers are saying things in there about what they need, what they want, what the problem is. And that's a thing. Another thing is, are you looking at industry analyst reports and seeing what they're saying about where things are going? Not just about what are they saying about your company and where you fit in the quadrant, but what are they saying about where things are going? What your competitors are going to be doing, what are they doing? What are those substitutable competitors, looking at and doing, right? So things that maybe aren't necessarily one-for-one competitors, but they're those things that maybe somebody's using instead of using your product. Yeah. So, right, those kind of things.
Yeah, I love that because Traci, you couldn't help yourself. The what if we do this question just naturally comes up in the way that you think about us starting to take action. So I love that. And I'm going to give a huge shout out because I think that listeners really need to take this to heart, Traci. Obviously, you've worked inside of companies like Accenture. You know how much these macro trends affect long-term strategy. It's something you introduced us to here today. And it's something that I'd say gets lost on the smaller business scale is that we forget that there are industry analysts whose entire job is to study the industries. It's harder for us when we're inside the jars to see the label on the outside. It's harder for us as practitioners as well as entrepreneurs and business owners to have that forward-looking insight. So I love the fact that you shared that with us here today, Traci. I'm going to ask you this. I've never framed the end of an episode this way, but Traci, you might be the start of a new trend here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. And that is, I almost want to ask you like the domino question, because what we're talking about today is you said it's a whole new way of thinking. It's a total paradigm shift, this concept of marketing powered innovation. So the way that I really want to close this episode is that domino question. What's the domino that gets the rest going, that really starts this entire process for all of us to take advantage of in our own businesses? What's that domino that you think, hey, listeners, having heard all of this stuff today, all these big concepts, so much homework that we all have to do, both short-term and long-term, what's the domino that starts that process for us?
Probably the necessity. Which is the mother of invention, apparently. It's that need your business has to create and to innovate. And perhaps it is you're not at the revenue focus that your targets that you need to hit. Maybe there's something happening that you can see a downward pressure on your sales. Perhaps it's you are in that business cycle stage of, you kind of moving out of growth and you're moving into maturity. You have to make a decision. Either you're going to innovate and renew, or you're going to not innovate and decline and eventually go out of business. So there is a necessity, whether you see it now or you see it later. The point is, you really need to think about it as early as possible so that it doesn't become a crisis later. I always tell my kids, it's not a crisis if you plan for it. If it's something that you plan for, then it's just an occurrence and you've already dealt with it and no big deal. But if it hits you and it's in between the eyes and you have no plan for it, then it's a crisis and it can take you down.
Yeah, Traci, I'm going to throw it out there. You moms always have the best advice, and you have such a unique way of articulating it that I love that you shared that with us with your mom hat on. So really powerful strategic insights. That's what I'm really taking away from today's episode is you nailed it. The intersection of innovation and marketing, but really so much of this has that strategic hat on, which I personally love because my word of the year is intention. And I think that far too often we're operating in our businesses and for sure inside of our marketing by just throwing things at the wall and saying, let's see what happens, which has its time and a place. But I love the fact that you're coming at it with that intention. Traci, you've introduced us to so many new things today. I'm so excited to see more and more of the marketplace start to embrace marketing powered innovation. So drop those links on us. I know you've got some awesome literature out there about all of your thoughts on all of these topics. Listeners will want to check out your work. Stage is yours. Where should they go from here?
Well, they can start with marketingpoweredinnovation.com and also with our company website at Claroti. That's CLAROTI.com.
Yes, listeners, you all know the drill. You do not have to go hunting very far for those links because we are linking to Traci's business website at claroti.com, CLAROTI.com. That link is down below, as well as her website about so much of this paradigm shift, this concept that she's introducing to the world. I think Traci is she's the mastermind behind it. She's spearheading the fact that businesses need to embrace this at that intersection of innovation and marketing. So definitely check out marketingpoweredinnovation.com. Those links are down below. Otherwise, Traci, thank you so much for being so generous, sharing so much of your brilliance with us here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thank you for having me, Brian.